Is Glendale, California the right place for you to live? You know, it just might be. It's where I grew up, great town. And by the way, I'm Victor Curry, a licensed real estate agent with Douglas Elliman Real Estate here, the Unver Group. And this is my dog Rufus, who decides that the best time to come and get some attention is once the camera rolls. So thank you, Rufus. Yeah, I think that's a very good idea. I agree with you. I'll tell them a little more about Glendale, okay? I grew up here, and really terrific spot. Actually right down the street, right down there. And I kept that house long after my parents passed away, and it became still the second home. So we've pretty much had a place here for almost 50 years. So it's a special kind of town. One of the things that's so great about Glendale is not only is it a great place in its own right and a growing city, much bigger than it was when I lived here all the time, but it's also a place that is really easy to get to other areas. Let's take a look around Glendale. We're going to look at a few areas and also give you a little bit of a feel for what's going on here with the market, so you understand what's happening in Glendale today. Let's take a little drive around my old neighborhood, which is Rossmoyne in Glendale.
So I grew up in this neighborhood, and growing up here, we just thought it was a nice area, nothing super special, but a great place to grow up. Now, the Rossmoyne district in Glendale is one of the hot spots. It's a historic district, and people take care of their houses. It's one of those areas where you're not allowed to just knock a house down and put up a little mini mansion. It's got some character that'll never really go away, which is something very special because in so many areas, especially over on the west side in neighborhoods with similar architectural styles, so much is being torn down and beautiful classic architecture is being destroyed to put up big glass boxes, and that's really a shame. That doesn't mean you can't update a property, it just means that the process can be different. The updates usually need to be in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. Through my elementary and junior high years, I was the local paper boy for this neighborhood, so I've been in a huge percentage of the homes in this area, which is a little weird to think of 50 years later. But I'd love to get inside a few more of these to see how they've been updated over the years. So if anybody wants me to sell their house for them or wants to know what it might be worth, it'd be a good excuse for me to come check it out.
So as long as you're here, go ahead and hit the subscribe button because we'll be going in depth, not just about Glendale, but also about other areas all around the region. And we'll also be talking on the podcast about selling and buying property here in LA and Orange County and all around other parts of California so you can understand what's going on in this crazy market that we're having right now. And if you want to talk about it, go ahead, reach out. Contact information's in the show notes down below. Let me tell you a little bit about the history of Glendale. It started out in the 1870s. It was a kind of area, one of the expansion areas as downtown was growing. And the trains were starting to build out and people wanted to be able to get out of the actual heart of the city and get out to the suburbs. And Glendale was one of the first of those because also one of the ways that you got around in those days was, of course, the trains and trolleys. And they ran the train out to Glendale. It started at the time, it was a kind of a joint venture between L.C. Brand and Henry Huntington. And you'll see Brand Boulevard and Brand Park and Brand Library. That's Brand. And so that was the early days of Glendale. And as it started to grow, post-war, first war, you started to see more of the trains coming in. You saw the red cars, the famous little small trolley cars that LA used to have, and we used to have a solid public transportation system that people actually liked. Beautiful architecture. The people who were moving here wanted some style, and you will see a lot of historic homes in Glendale. We're going to take a look at a whole bunch of different areas today and get a feel for the design, the architecture, and why the architecture is surviving, because so many of the areas have been declared as historic preservation zones. And you can't just tear them down and put up a big box like you see in most of the beautiful areas of this type over on the west side. So there's a lot of really good positive about the way Glendale has developed over the years. There's some issues that, people complain about, all of the gigantic amount of apartments that are being built around downtown, and those are very boxy and they are mostly lacking in style and design. And I understand why people are a little frustrated by that. But they also need some density. Glendale is far more than double the size of where it was. So it's a growing city. The education has always been a big draw for Glendale. You'll also find that business has expanded. It's now becoming more of a tech hub. You're seeing a lot of technology startups going in there. You'll also find that that entertainment has massively expanded over it in Glendale. It was on the edge of the areas where entertainment was in the old days. There's just a lot of stuff going on in Glendale right now. It's always been a financial center too, so there's financial business there. It's a city that is looking towards the future, but it still embraces its historical past from a design standpoint. So it's a good place to look at. So let's dig into a little bit. Downtown Glendale has emerged. It's a big shopping destination. Now, it was pretty quiet when I was growing up. When I was a kid in the 60s and 70s, Glendale's, it had 3 or 4 tall buildings downtown. The Glendale Federal Savings Building was one of the tallest, and there was an old bank building that was done in the 40s that was relatively tall, and the spire of the Alex Theater. And that's pretty much it. Downtown was pretty much low-rise and stores and some theaters and things. Today, Glendale's grown into this popular shopping and entertainment hub downtown. You have the upmarket Americana brand. It's a Rick Caruso Developments. It was done well. And it's always busy. It's always hopping. And they've got upmarket stores, Gucci, Tiffany, those. But also you've got the big movie theater there. They do concerts on the green. It's really pretty. The old Glendale Galleria that surrounds it has been doing a revamp, and that's going to be continuing, and that'll get bigger and bigger, and that's always still popular as far as malls go. A lot of the indoor malls aren't doing that well. I was in it the other day, and I was shocked how busy it was. All along Grand Boulevard, you have shops and restaurants and stores, and it's busy. People go there, and that's kind of a shock because growing up there, it wasn't like that. It was pretty quiet, except in the evenings, and there were a few restaurants. Damon's is still there, which is one of our favorites for all of these years when we were growing up. I love Montrose. It's got great old style charm. There's little boutiques, and it's got a weekly farmer's market, and it's a really popular area for film shoots. There's something, you've seen Montrose. Trust me, you've seen Montrose in something, whether it's taking the place of something that was set in the 1950s, or if it's just supposed to be small town Americana somewhere. Montrose still has that.
And if you're someone who misses the old LA, the old nostalgic California, if you get into one of the areas around Montrose, you're finding something special, and you'll find a lifestyle that goes back 30, 40, 50 years. It still has a lot of that feel of a small town, but you're still convenient to everything else, like any other part of Glendale. And you have Glendale schools and Glendale services. So it's hard to argue against Montrose as a solid place to consider these days. If you want that small town atmosphere, and you still want to live in Glendale, take a look at Montrose.
I like how the Sparr Heights area is right below Montrose. So you have this great little small town feel, but a lot of great little small town feel homes right next to each other. If you're looking for something that reminds you a little bit of, the old America, it's pretty tough to beat Montrose from that standpoint.
There are a lot of little adorable properties and some beautiful classic architecture. And the homes tend to be a little smaller than some of the other classic areas. So if you want to use one of the more overused cliche phrases in real estate descriptions, Sparr Heights is essentially the definition of quaint. Jumping over to the northern side of Glendale to the west, let's talk a little bit about Brockmont. Brockmont was developed in 3 distinct phases over the last century. The original phase was done in the 1920s and 1930s, and it has the typical Glendale Mediterranean and Spanish architecture and quite a lot of Tudor. It's at the base of the hills, with some of the homes having a view. It's a pretty area. And then there's a second phase as technology developed that allowed more building up into the hills in the 1950s and the 1960s. So you can see more of the early view properties with some nice mid-century homes sprinkled in. Then the last phase, which was done in the late 70s and early 80s and beyond, is when it really took off because they finally had gotten to the point where they could economically develop all these beautiful lots that have gigantic views of everything all the way to downtown LA and beyond. As much as I talk about how much I love the historical architecture nature of Glendale, I love all good quality architectural design, especially good mid-century. Getting up into the hills of Brockmont, you see a more modern take on hillside development. It's worth taking a look at Brockmont if a hillside home is the kind of property that appeals to you. It appeals to me, especially since much of it is much more accessible than most hillside view homes.
You know, I always wished I had a horse. Never got a horse. Oh well, I'll live,
But the Riverside Rancho area is where you would live if you had a horse, because it's right on the edge of Griffith Park. And if you don't know, if you're not from the area, Griffith Park is the largest urban park in the United States, and it's huge, and you can ride all over the place, and you're still in the heart of LA. And Riverside Rancho is right there. It's on the southwest portion of Glendale, and it shares the Rancho area with Burbank, and it's right beside the LA Equestrian Center. And super convenient if you work in the entertainment industry and you want to be in Glendale, but you're trying to decide where you want to be. You don't have to have a horse to live in the Riverside Rancho. It's just a great spot that's super convenient to the film studios, Disney and Warner and Universal and all the production companies all the way around the valley there. It's super easy to get to everything there without even getting on the freeways. And there's a lot of other good reasons to live there,
but especially if you have a horse. Hello, Rufus. Rufus came back. Can we tell them about Glendale? Verdugo Woodlands, another beautiful area. It fits its name. When you hear the Woodlands part of it, as you drive through, you see these beautiful homes surrounded by the old growth trees, and you really do feel like you're out in nature.
There are so many beautiful homes in all these different streets. Some of them were developed a little later in the 50s and 60s, so you'll see some more modern architectural style mixed in. There's quite a bit of mid-century ranch mixed in with the typical Glendale Mediterranean and Spanish revival. You can definitely see where the area gets its name. It's woodlands at the base of the Verdugo Mountains. In fact, my old 5th grade teacher, Mrs. McKinley's family, owned the original Casa Verdugo adobe up there, and she would have the kids up there for a field trip. And it's now owned by the city, and they still do tours and events. So it's cool to see how the neighborhood was started and is being preserved, because all of Glendale was originally Spanish grant land that was eventually bought out and developed and gave the area its original architectural style and character.
A lot of my friends grow up over there, and it was really a pretty spot. You would always go wandering through. I used to ride my bicycle all the way through there. And Verdugo Park was a terrific area where we all would go hang out and play and climb on all the things and jump off stuff that they don't let kids jump off anymore.
Adams Hill in the south part of Glendale is another of the older areas, and it has some amazing views. It's one of those places you drive through and go, wow, that's not the view I expected, or that's not the amazing hillside home I expected to find. It's an interesting area. I've sold over in Highland Park, which is in the city of LA just nearby, and while both areas have their pluses, I think anyone considering Highland Park or Grosell Park or Mount Washington should really think about Adams Hill. There's some really cool, really eclectic kind of places in there, and with the explosion of property values in areas like Frogtown and Atwater that are right nearby, it's worth thinking about the value of being in Glendale and still being in these trending areas. It's an interesting place to think about for the long run. Now, if you go completely the other direction, let's go all the way up to the top of the La Crescenta area. Crescenta Highlands is the half of La Crescenta that's in the city of Glendale. The other part is in unincorporated LA County, though both have Glendale schools, so you're still in the Glendale School District even if you're in the unincorporated part. but the section west of Pennsylvania Avenue is part of Glendale and its great suburban life. It's pretty, and it's up in the hills, so you get some beautiful views in a lot of the properties. And if you go all the way up to the top, you get to the Deukmejian Wildlife Preserve.
I am not in the physical shape I should be to do the 10-mile hike all the way around the trail here, but you can, and it's gorgeous. And you have these amazing views down below where you can kind of see forever. What's great about the whole Crescenta Highlands area and being able to come up here to the Wilderness Park is you've got some nature really conveniently. And you've also got the 210 freeway that'll take you into the San Fernando Valley or over to Pasadena. You got the 2 that'll take you through Glendale and all the way downtown. All of that is conveniently surrounding you, but you've also got all this nature. Pretty cool spot.
El Miradero is the area where you find Brand Park and Brand Library. Brand Park is the old Leslie Brand estate, and it has become part of the city, and it's one of my favorite places in Glendale. Long before I was born here, he even had his own airport up here. I used to go there all the time because they had the best record collection, and you could actually check out the vinyl records and then record them and play them back on your cassette player. I'm obviously showing my age here. Anyway, it's a really nice area with all the traditional Glendale architecture and some later built homes. And then right next to El Miradero, you have the areas of Glenwood and Grandview and Cumberland Heights with more great architecture and all these things, some big ones up in Cumberland. And there are all different price points in there, from the less expensive down toward Glen Oaks Boulevard. And of course, it gets more expensive the farther you get up into the hills. And some of the properties have a view and all those other things that affect pricing on property. All of these are just great neighborhoods, plus they're very convenient if you work in Burbank or over in the Valley, since you're already over on that side of town, and the 5 is right below if you want to head into LA. Rancho San Rafael has these beautiful rolling hills. It's in an area up above Glendale College and was built in the late 80s and 90s, a little later than most of the other neighborhoods in Glendale. It's much more like the kind of homes you find out in Calabasas or in Orange County. They have that modern tract home feel, but saying that, it's very well done, and it's out in the hills, and some of these have really beautiful views of the hills themselves, and others that are built more into the hillsides. And some of the homes are attached duplexes and then more that are single-family properties. It's an interesting development, and it's extremely convenient if you want to be able to commute easily to downtown Los Angeles, because you've got the Glendale Freeway right there and you can hop on and you're in downtown in 20 minutes. But you'd never know that the freeway was there when you're in the homes themselves. Take the long road up past Rancho San Rafael through the hills and you'll come to Emerald Isle. Or you can get to Emerald Isle the original way from Chevy Chase Canyon. Now, most of this was developed in the 60s and the 70s, and a lot of nice properties are in there, and it's a beautiful spot right between Glendale and Pasadena and La Cañada. Very pretty area. And then beside Emerald Isle, you have the actual Chevy Chase Canyon area by the Chevy Chase Country Club, and you have the Canyon Road that comes in from the central part of Glendale. And Chevy Chase Canyon itself has a similar feel to what you'd find in Laurel Canyon or Coldwater Canyon, with homes built into the natural flow of the land. There's some amazing architecture, including several Lloyd Wright houses in there. And it's one of those areas that is out of the heart of the city, so you get a little bit more privacy, and you get a little more quiet, and you get a little bit more nature, but you're still convenient to everything. Now, going with that same line of thinking, if you want to be surrounded by nature, there's a really cool little area up in the north part of Glendale and getting up towards La Crescenta called Whiting Woods. And you really do feel like you're right out in the forest there because the homes are built in and around the old growth. It's just gorgeous. There are a few spots in there and in the little canyons nearby where you see some amazing mid-century architecture that you don't even realize is there, but mid-century obsessives like me love to stumble onto. The Greenbrier area is one that offers a lot of different types of homes. In the older part, which is along and off Royal Boulevard, you have those traditional Glendale beautiful places, though a lot of these ones are some of the largest built in that busy growth period back in the 20s and the 30s. It's a beautiful area built in and around the canyons, like most of Glendale. And then off of Greenbrier itself, there's a lot of newer development, a lot that was done in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and even a little later as they started to build farther out, more to the west within the borders of the Greenbrier district. And you get some amazing views from some of them. There's also some construction going on more recently of some pretty spectacular large modern view properties. Great spot up there. I have a little confession to make. As I drive through the Vineyard area, I had no idea it was called this. I'd never thought about it. It was actually something just came up as I was looking at things going, it's Vineyard, and I'm like, oh, it's written up all over the place as Vineyard. And all these years, all this time in Glendale, I did not know it was called Vineyard, even though I know the area. So, no matter how much we think we know, we don't know everything. Vineyard, just west of downtown and south of the 134, is a bit of a mix. It's a really haphazard development area. So it's a mix of condos and apartments and single-family homes, a little bit of everything. It still has a lot going for it because it's very convenient to the world being right there near downtown Glendale and both the 134 and 5 freeways. So if you want something centrally located, this is Vineyard. If you're looking to buy in an area that you think is likely to turn in the future that hasn't necessarily turned yet, there are a few of those, and they're mostly more down towards the southwest portion of Glendale. Pacific-Edison and Tropico are the main examples of that. And I think that way because they're high-density areas just off of the industrial areas off of San Fernando Road. Tropico is one of the oldest areas of Glendale, and it's easy to pop over Los Feliz Boulevard into Hollywood. And also the Metrolink station is over there too. And if you go over the other side of the 5 freeway into LA, you're in areas like Frogtown and Atwater and Silver Lake, and those are some of the hottest markets. A lot of the older homes have already been knocked down, especially if they have a decent-sized lot, and they're being developed into condominiums and apartments, and I think that's going to continue. So if you're looking at it from a pure investment standpoint, it might be worth looking over in those areas. I'm not giving you financial advice here, but I do tend to think that there's always opportunities in any market and in any neighborhood. So it's well worth taking a look at that if you're thinking from that standpoint, or if you're just trying to get into Glendale in a more affordable part of the community. But I'll be very interested to see what these areas are going to be looking like in 20 years.
The Oakmont area of Glendale has always been one of the most sought-after neighborhoods in the city. It's centered around the historic Oakmont Country Club and extends up into the hills above. The area tends to appeal to homeowners looking for a quiet but upscale neighborhood with fantastic views and some rich history. Homes around the country club tend to be large, custom-built properties on big lots and were mostly built between the 1920s and the 1950s. Architecturally, the homes in the lower Oakmont area around the country club tend to lean towards Spanish colonial revival, mid-century modern, and ranch styles. These luxury homes were generally designed with features like expansive lawns and large driveways and swimming pools, and many of the original homes have been meticulously maintained, and then some have been modernized to reflect contemporary taste on the inside while retaining their historic charm on the outside. As you move up into the hills above the country club, the terrain becomes more rugged and the homes become more modern. Development in the upper Oakmont hills began to take off in the 60s and the 70s, and then later phases in the 80s and into the early 2000s saw a new wave of larger custom-built homes and a lot more contemporary and Mediterranean designs. These homes were built to take advantage of the steep terrain and the views that come with that, with multiple level designs, with expansive balconies and floor-to-ceiling windows and terraced landscaping. The homes in the Oakmont area, whether they're near the country club or up in the hills, are known for their quality and privacy and the breathtaking views they offer.
Glendale really is one of those areas that had something for everybody. And if you are thinking about living in the northeast portion of Los Angeles, it's definitely one of the areas to think about. And if you are already living there, you understand what a good place it is. We've looked at a lot of different areas of Glendale today, and there are many more that we didn't even get to because there are so many little smaller sub-neighborhoods around there. Some of them are popping up on the map right now. We'll be looking around some of those in future videos and get a little more in-depth into some of the areas and things to do around Glendale and Pasadena and both valleys and Orange County and all these areas. And if you want to hit that subscribe button, we will be happy to show you around various places all around the region. And also on the podcast, we'll be talking about different ways that the real estate market is changing and how it can affect your life, whether you're selling, buying, own a home right now, or thinking about buying one in the future. And if you'd like to know a little bit more about what's happening in the market anywhere in Los Angeles or Orange counties, reach out. The contact information is down below, and we'd be happy to talk to you. And thank you for watching.